Okay, so I'm finally going to talk a little bit about the Vortex new Diamondback 10x50 binoculars that I picked up. Now that I've used them for several months, I thought I'd go ahead and do kind of a quick review. This isn't something real formal where I'm going to go through specs and how it compares to others. Just kind of my observations of what I felt so far having used them. Now, these binoculars, you'll have to look and see what they're going for right now. I can put a link below, but typically they were going for around $250 when I would find them at a Bass Pro or a Cabela's or Sportsman's, most of those normal big box retailers. Now you can get them a little cheaper on Amazon. I saw some deals, I think as low as about $210 around Christmas of last year, so it kind of depends on the time of year and depends on if you can find a sale or something like that. So these aren't the most expensive binoculars. Obviously these aren't a high-end, Leica or Swarovski set of binoculars, but they're not the cheapest either. You can go out and you can buy a a $50 or $60 pair of binoculars and find the box just kind of set out on the showroom floor of a Big 5 or something like that. So these represent kind of a middle grade, which is what I was looking for. So I went and I knew, I've had a chance to look at Leicas and Swarovskis and look through them a little bit, and they're absolutely amazing glass, especially compared to this. This isn't as nice, but you can spend $1,200, $2,200 on some of those binoculars, and I just didn't have the money to spend on that on a pair of binoculars for now. So what I did, and what I would suggest you do, instead of just running out and buying whatever you see a review for, is go to some of those bigger stores and try out as many of those binoculars as you can. I looked at pretty much everything from about $100 to $500, and I looked through a whole bunch of different brands. Not only Vortex, I looked through the Nikons, the Bushnells, plus I think some of the brands that they had that were, Bass Pro's brand or things like that. And I found that the cheaper ones, I definitely noticed, did not seem to do quite as well. Now the more expensive ones, for me personally, I found when I stepped between these at about $250 and I stepped up closer to $500 and looked through, for example, some of Vortex glass that they start marketing as HD, I noticed a little bit of a difference for those. I think it's the Viper is the next step up. I've noticed a little bit of a difference, but it wasn't that much. I had to go back and forth, try these, try those, and ultimately I only saw a little bit of an improvement. Now out in the field, if I'm glassing for an hour, maybe it would stand out more, but the step for me from this class around $250 to the more expensive ones around $500, I just didn't see much of an increase in quality or the way that the glass looked. I did definitely see an increase as you went into the $1,000, $1,200 range, but I didn't want to look at something I knew I wasn't going to get, so I didn't spend a lot of time looking at those. So in that $250 range, plus or minus, I went ahead and I looked at all the different binoculars that were available, and I would go back and forth. I'd try the Nikon, I'd try the Bushnell, I'd go look through these, and you might be able to go to a store that'll let you look at them outside, but there's a good chance that you're going to be looking at them in the store. So what I would do is I would just try to find the furthest area I could across the store, something as far away. I would look for the animal mounts. If you're at a Bass Pro, look at those elk mounts or pronghorn mounts, because one of the things I would try to do is see how easy is it to make out the points on a rack. Can you make out the fur? So even though maybe it's not as far away as you would like to test the binoculars because the store is not big enough, you can at least look in that distance, and maybe it's only 70 yards across the store, but you can look and try to, can you make out the hair, the fur on one of those animals? I would also look, and I would try to find the darker corners of the store, and I would look through into those darker corners, because that is something I noticed with the better glass, is because it's so much sharper, it lets more of that light in those shadowed areas, those dark areas. And honestly, I think that's a big part of what separates good glass from bad glass. Is if it's in the middle of the day and the sun is out and it's super bright, even relatively basic binoculars will work. They may not resolve as much detail as a nicer pair, but they will work. Where I've noticed in the past with cheaper binoculars I've used is some of those late evening, early morning times where you're out looking for animals and you're scouting through the binoculars, they get very hard to see through very quickly. And that's a big difference when you have good quality glass that's nice and sharp, is you can see through it a lot better. You can make out those details even in low light. Another thing with that sharper glass that I've noticed is I've always had a problem with cheaper binoculars getting both sides focused to my eye. They, even with the diopter on one side and doing everything I can to adjust it to both eyes, most cheap, and I'm talking about, those $80 and less pairs that I've used, most of those I have a hard time getting my eyes used to looking through both of them at the same time. And if I do it for more than, a solid 20 minutes at a time, sometimes less, it starts fatiguing my eyes, and it gets more and more uncomfortable to look through them the longer it goes. I went antelope hunting last year, and I was spotting through just a cheap small pair of 8x28 Bushnells that, they're about this big, and they just, again, in the middle of the day when there's a lot of light and I need to look through them for just a minute or two, they're okay. There's something that maybe I would leave in the truck and just have them in there just in case. But I've found with this, I haven't had an opportunity to hunt with them yet, but I have gone out like today. It's end of September and I'm out hiking around. This isn't where I'm going to be hunting, but it is an area with animals, and it's a chance to get out and do a little more kind of experimentation with these. And with these, I find I can look, if I want to go up somewhere where I'm going to spend a couple hours glassing throughout the day, my eyes don't get tired with these. I've also had it set up on a tripod, and I've gone to some of these long-range shooting matches where we'll put it in the tripod mount, which I can show some pictures of what that looks like. But we put it in that tripod mount and then set it up on a tripod at standing height, and then you can just stand there right behind them. And I've stood there for 10-15 minutes, pretty much not looking away, spotting for other shooters, and it's completely comfortable. So I do definitely like having a little bit better pair of binoculars, and I think there is a lot of value to kind of go out and look at what your budget is. Don't just decide that you have to buy the $1,000 because that's what everybody says. Granted, those are going to be excellent binoculars, but just because they're $1,000, is that what you need? Because for me, I wouldn't mind the $1,000, but if I'm going to spend that much money on a pair of binoculars, I think I would rather go all the way up to just a Leica range-finding pair, and that may be $2,000. But if I'm going to be spending that kind of money, I get quality binoculars and a high-quality rangefinder. So for me, this $250 range was kind of what I needed for now. They're not perfect. I'm going to go ahead and do a review video, and I'll kind of talk about what I like and what I don't like about them. But for me, this represented a good balance, and I knew that because I went out and I tried it, and not just one time. I think I not only going to multiple stores, but over the course of about 6 months, I was watching to see if I could get a lower price. I'd go back in the store and I'd double check, because there was times I would go back and forth, and maybe Vortex and the Nikons were really, really close. So trying to decide which one I liked better, I'd looked through one for a few minutes and then I'd switch to the other. Another thing I did, these are 10 by 50s. The kind of more common size is a 10 by 42. Well, the 10 by 42s are a little lighter. The 10 by 50s are a little bigger and heavier, but they should also let in a little more light if you're glassing early in the morning or late in the evening. So that was another thing I did. I had a hard time finding a store that had the 10 by 50s and the 10 by 42s in stock at the same time. But when I finally found one, I spent some time, I would hold them both up, and I would sit there and I would look through them, and I'd kind of hold it for a little while, for several minutes, to see, did the 10 by 50s feel significantly heavier when I held them? I did find that, to me, the 10 by 50s seemed to settle a little quicker when I would come up and kind of get into a glassing position, and this was just hand holding in the store. The 10 by 50s pretty quickly settled into my hand and felt more stable initially, but if I held them up for a couple minutes, I did notice the difference. So just a quick come up, glass for a second, come down, I don't notice the weight difference. But if you're going to sit there and hold it for a long time, you definitely do. So definitely try out several different pairs. In fact, I'd gone kind of back and forth between the Nikons, and I don't remember the exact model right now, but a Nikon and this Vortex Diamondback. And my brother was with me one day, and he was looking at them with me, and we kind of went back and forth, and we would, he'd have one, and he'd have the Nikon, I'd have the Bushnell, or we'd set the Vortex out on the counter, and then we had a guy that just basically let us, we would just trade back and forth. Okay, try the Vortex, try the Bushnell, try the Nikon. And we'd kind of go back and forth and say, oh, well, I like the Vortex better. He'd say he liked the Nikon better. And then we would look, and maybe we'd look into a shadow part of the store, and I would think the Vortex did better, he would think the Nikon did better. So it wasn't always an easy, oh, this one's obviously better than that one. So yeah, pick the one that works well for you. And I will definitely say there's a lot of value of having those binoculars with you. It doesn't matter if you're hunting, if you're hiking, if you're using them at the range, whatever you're doing with them, having a good pair of binoculars is nice to have. There's a lot of times I'm hiking or hunting, and you're looking at a brown spot through the trees or up on a hillside, and you're trying to decide, is that an animal? What is that? What kind of animal? And I've had a lot of times where I look and I look and I look with my bare eyes, and I can't decide what it is. And then, like, okay, I'm going to break out the binoculars, bring them up, and immediately, like, oh, that's a bush, that's a stump, or oh, that is a deer. So definitely can make a big deal. I was able to, I showed this in my unboxing video, but I got a glass pack as part of a promotional deal when I bought them. It was thrown in. It was something I don't know that I would have bought initially, and it was a little awkward to wear this at first. It sits here, not something I'm used to, having something on my chest, but I have found that having them right there all the time while I'm hiking makes it very easy to just pop them out, glass, put them back in. It does hold close to your chest, and then if I adjust it correctly, it doesn't bounce around, it doesn't move around. It fits underneath the backpack straps, so I can basically leave it on, take my backpack on and off as I need to, and that just stays on. So I've actually really been liking it. This particular one, I'll have to maybe put the name down below. They make two of them. This is the smaller one, and it just barely fits these 10 by 52s. I have to make sure that the eyepiece extension is down, and it's kind of a tight squeeze. The body has to be squeezed together. It can't be you know, out, set to whatever your eye distance is. You have to squeeze them together and then stuff it in here. But, oh, and then it does stretch the little tab a little more than I'd like. I'm guessing that's probably going to be one of the first failure points. But overall, I think this makes a big difference, because there's a lot of times I would carry binoculars in a backpack, and I just, most of the time, if I was out hiking and I saw something, I wouldn't stop and take the time to pull it out and look at it. So that's a little bit about just kind of choosing binoculars and how it's beneficial to not only get a better pair of binoculars, but don't just run out and buy something because of a review, because you and that reviewer may have a different preference. So go ahead and, if you can, go in, try a bunch of these out, try different price ranges, because you may find that even though those $1,000 pair of binoculars are better, that $500 pair is going to work for you. And you know, they do say buy once, cry once, and there's definitely a lot of truth to that. If you know, hey, look, in 6 months I'm going to want that $1,000 pair, then maybe it's not worth buying a $250 pair or a $500 pair. But if you know these, I'll probably keep them forever. Even if I upgrade at some point later, these are good enough quality that they're going to stay around, or they're going to be something that, you know, I let my kids use, or somebody else that's with me. We did go to Glacier National Park and Banff National Park earlier this year. I took these, and they were excellent. Just had them up on the dash as we were driving around looking for animals, and you know, I'd look through them. You'd see mountain goats up on a hill, bighorn sheep up on a ridge line, and I'd look through it. The kids would use them, my wife would. I mean, even if they're not as good as some of the others, they're sharp enough and they were high quality enough that they did everything that we needed out of them. So that's pretty much it for this one. Thanks for watching, guys. Let me know what you think below. You know, do you feel like you have to have the most expensive binoculars out there, or have you found a certain model or a certain price range that seems to work well for you? Let me know below. Thanks.